All right, it's Sergeant Pepper. We know this one, right? This is 50 years old this summer, and they just came out with a big remastered deluxe edition for that. This is the classic everybody knows, right? Beatles, Sergeant Pepper. But I'm not going to talk about this because look at that. Look at that word right there. Stereo, right? I was going to talk about that, and then I said, no. We're going to talk about that. That right there. The Beatles in mono. This little sexy little box right here it's not everything you need for the Beatles, but it's just about everything you need Beatles-wise. And let's talk about that because you think you hear this, in mono, and mono was like early, in the 50s, early 60s, old, maybe jazz records or shitty early rock records are in mono, and then it was like stereo. And since then we've had stereo, and I love stereo too. I love the separation and shit flying around the headphones, and Sergeant Pepper has some of that, dogs on the end of Good Morning are flying around, and I love that, and I love like separation in guitars in different channels, and I like to hear the band in a stereo picture. So I'm somebody, I hear Beatles in mono. What, I guess it's sort of a curiosity thing, maybe, but no. The Beatles in mono are honestly the way you should listen to the Beatles. Now, let's say this, first of all. Besides that this is a tremendous set, and you see how adorable these albums are. Look at how cute that is. These, see? And it's an exact replica. But let's just say this, first of all. This came out in 2009 because it was a big thing that the Beatles are getting remastered. Stereo, there is a stereo box set, and most of what you see, you'll see if they still have Beatles CDs in Best Buys or something, or Targets or whatever, you're going to see the stereo, you might see a stereo Pepper or stereo Let It Be or something. So this is this is a kind of a collector's thing. But when the big stereo, the big remastered rollout in 2009 of the Beatles stuff, it sort of created some anxiety with Beatles fans because let's establish this, that when you see the word remastered on something, generally that's bullshit. It's a way to make money from the rubes. Because if you want to remaster one of your albums, you just take your car stereo, turn the volume up, turn the treble up, turn the bass up, play with it how you want. You just remastered your album. That's all they do on these, generally. And you see, remastered Metallica. They bump it up louder. They bump up the bass a little bit. Whatever they do. They're never going to bump up the bass in Justice for All, but it's bullshit. And it's the term that you get, something's brick-walled, which means when you put it through, you put the waveform through and look at it, it looks like it fills up the screen. You don't get highs and lows, and you don't get any real depth in the music because they just bumped it louder. So I just saved everybody a lot of money because remastered is bullshit, generally. Like, for example, Led Zeppelin, they've remastered a bunch of times. Believe it or not, if you want to hear the best Led Zeppelin, say, on CD, get the original CDs that came out in the 80s. Don't get remastered shit. it goes pretty much across the board, and its only exceptions are when remasters are good. So when the Beatles were going to be remastered, people said, wait. You can't brick wall the Beatles. So they took a lot of care in making sure that the remaster process, going through the original tapes and really having some, not just recording hacks to do it, but really careful. Two different teams actually, I think, did the mono and the stereo. But so back to this thing. Why do we care that the Beatles this box in mono, And so this came out, was a limited edition actually. And we go back and we say, well, first of all these Beatles albums were originally made for mono, which means just a one channel. Everything's mixed, and some of the early albums, Beatles for Sale, Hard Day's Night, Please Please Me, stuff is mixed like hard separation. Like there's literally like drums and bass in one side and guitars or vocals in the other side, which is fine. I can deal with that. That's okay. The mono is preferable in that sense because everything's centered. But it's deeper than that because, you could just say, well, you take your two channels and just mix them into one. It's called a fold down. No, these were, the Beatles, I don't need to say, are extra special. These mixes, these original mixes that the Beatles sat and listened to in the studio and approved. Maybe they didn't approve every one, but whether they approve them or not, what those original mixes that came out of Abbey Road in the 60s, that they approved those albums were in mono. And ever since then, it's been more likely we've had stereo stuff. Here's Help. There's actually a difference. There's little differences in the in some of the mixes, and this is one of them. Help. I think the mono Help actual song is a little different, but it's more than that. And they really took care for the first time to let the fans sort of. A lot of these old mono LPs were out of print. Now the fans with this set were able to actually hear what the Beatles sound like, and so here's the thing. In a weird way, mono Sgt. Pepper is better, and I'd say almost more psychedelic and just a cooler experience than it is in stereo. It's more than just saying, oh, everything's in the middle. No, man, you listen creatively, you listen with your imagination, as lame as that sounds. Listen as this is supposed to be listened to. Smoke up something good and listen to this. And the mono just has, you might say, it's more punch. It's basically just a more listenable album. And so when I go to play the Beatles, I don't play the stereo stuff anymore. I play these monos. The Mono Masters is replacing the old, what was it called? Past Masters, which is basically, it collects all the Beatles singles. These tunes, you listen to, say, Paperback Writer, Day Tripper, Lady Madonna, Revolution, Hey Jude. These songs kick so much more ass in mono, and it takes you back to what the Beatles intended for these. In particular, all these singles were supposed to be 45 singles. That was an art in itself in this time, to produce these singles. They had to not only kick your ass in the sense, and they had to be full of melody and have energy, the kind of thing that you're going to put it on your little, your little record player and play it again and again, flip it over, play it again and again. They had to be infectious. They had to just work as singles you hear again and again. It's one of the genius, and it's how the Beatles, what they made their reputation on a lot of these early singles, even more than the albums. Now we have another thing here. Oh, here's Revolver's better in mono too, I would say. Revolver is I'm still not crazy about. It's okay. I mean, the mix is a little bright, no matter how you listen to Revolver. And let's note that maybe the one exception is the White Album, which I might say I'd prefer in stereo. And let's note that we don't have Let It Be, we don't have Abbey Road, because there was no mono mixes. So generally, real late Beatles, probably White Album and beyond, you're going to want your stereo. But before that, you want mono when you're listening to the Beatles. And I'm going to include Sgt. Pepper in that. Pretty much every one of these. Maybe Mystery Tour you want stereo. Definitely Rubber Soul mono. But here's the other thing. So we just had the interesting thing about the new Sgt. Pepper is, and the difference of what's going on with this 2009 remasters, is just like remaster is kind of bullshit. The idea of remix is not bullshit. So the next thing, really, what they've got to do with the Beatles is remix, which means that a lot of these albums, so particular Sgt. Pepper, this is recorded on a 4-track machine. It's one of the reasons it's such an amazing achievement. And it's amazing that they pushed as far as they did, because you have 4 tracks you can record. It's even hard to record a regular 4-piece band in 4 tracks. You can record your bass, drums, 2 guitars, and you ran out of tracks. So it means they literally had to take those 4 tracks, copy them to another tape, copy that single mix to 1 track, add 3 more things to that, fill up the 4-track, bounce it down again, etc., etc. So you want to record your drums in stereo, you're going to use an extra track. That's an extra process. You want to do the shit they did on Sgt. Pepper, you're talking about lots of bounce down. You're talking about recording orchestras, and doing this with 4 tracks. You do like your own home bedroom recordings. 4 tracks, you're gonna run out of room. The fact that they did this album on 4 tracks is stunning. But let's think about that. All that bouncing down, copying to another tape, you're losing sound quality. So what these remasters did, and I'm glad that they did it, they just took the final masters of what you've always heard, of what you heard on this original LP, and they just said, okay, we're going to put it on CD, we're going to maybe try to clean it up a little bit, but take care and not do like the regular common remaster thing for the Rubes, and really try to do a nice job, which they did. But a remix means they go back through all those original tracks before they got bounced down. Meaning you're saying a really substantial improvement in sound quality. So those original 4 drum, bass, guitars, take those 4, then take the next 3 they did on the next mix, and mix those original first real generation tapes. One of the things with that is, of course, now you're getting into, this is not their original intention. No matter how they work at it, it's not going to be the original Sgt. Pepper. And that's the kind of thing maybe not everybody would notice. And it's not saying that I don't like to see them doing that. But it's the other thing about this box is, because of that, Sgt. Pepper, and even in the stereo remixes, say Abbey Road, which was always known through the 70s, and still today is known as like a real sonic achievement. When you were buying like a hi-fi stereo system in the 70s and 80s, you put on, they'd either play you in the store Abbey Road or Dark Side of the Moon to really test the system, as just like gold standards for studio recordings. Be honest, Abbey Road didn't sound so good in these remasters. Pepper doesn't sound so hot, and I'm saying that relatively. White Album, yeah, I mean, of course, I love it, but, it is what it is. You're not hearing a substantial improvement. What you did hear a substantial improvement is, say, like, Please Please Me, because they didn't do a lot of bouncing down. This album just comes alive on these, like this mono mix of it, this remastered mix. This is how you got to hear this album. Before this was on like scratchy records with the stereo separation. Now this really, I mean, this is a tremendous record. This is like recorded in 2 days or something, and when they were really right out of the clubs, and it's and half of it's goofy cover songs, and it's John Lennon has a cold through half of it, famously Misery. He sounds like he's got to blow his nose through half the song. So it's an interesting thing. And then with the Beatles was the second one. This is probably the worst Beatles album with the Beatles. I know that's it doesn't say. Of course, it's still great, but this became Meet the Beatles in the United States albums. As we know, these are these are all the British albums, because when the Beatles were in America, for the American market, these got broken into like about twice as many albums, because they wanted to. And in some ways, those are. It's not necessarily a bad thing. They'd include singles, etc., etc. But it's really like what we need now is, if you want to hear Abbey Road, you want to hear a remix of it. So, and that's going to be, they'll probably have to wait till the anniversary. So I bet next year we'll get a remix of the White Album, which I think they even give you do they give you the poster? I think so. The White Album is by far my favorite. Look at that, I'm looking in the back like it's a track listing. No. This is the best, to me this is the best the Beatles ever got, and this is like extra special record. But anyway, that's why I say Beatles in mono. God bless this box. This is like the Bible and the Quran right here. I pray to this thing every Sunday morning. So, and God bless Sgt. Pepper. Happy birthday, 50 years. But I gotta tell you, I don't put this on anymore. I put this one, mono. And so that was the Beatles in mono for Shem Depends, Record Reviews, and the Keystone Statement.